Since 2012 to this day, one of the dominating issues in the narrative about Asia is whether the Philippines will become a victim in a U.S.-China conflict. And in the past weeks, in our discussions with Mr. Professor Celso Cainglet, he proposed the idea that China is a disadvantage for some reasons. We'll ask Celso to explain that. At the same time, we also invited General Corpus to present the other side of the question that China cannot lose in its backyard. So let's begin with Celso. Why do you think China has a disadvantage in such a situation? And of course, our second part, who will win? But the first part is war or not. Maybe there won't be war, but anyway, let's focus on the second part of the question. Who can win?
Well, my premise is if USA and China will go to war today, my premise is today, I think China will lose, for several reasons. As General Patton said, war is fought by men. You see in the internet a lot of comparisons between hardware of the military hardware of USA and military hardware of China. But I believe when it comes to actual combat, it will not be the military hardware that will determine the outcome of the war, but the soldiers themselves. And the disadvantage of China is that their People's Liberation Army has no combat experience. Unlike the America, they had Afghanistan and all those, Iraq, Whereas in China, their last combat experience was during the occupation of Tibet. And they were confronted by less inferior forces of Tibet. And many of those soldiers were involved there were either dead or retired already. They have no combat experience. Number two, the armed forces of China is not the armed forces of China, but the armed forces of the Communist Party. The notion of nationhood is very, very important for a soldier. I'm fighting for my country, America or the Philippines. For them, they're fighting for their party. Number three, China does not have a joint command, unlike the United States. So in China, what the Navy is doing, the Air Force does not know, although they claim recently that they're already putting up a joint command. Number four, China faces a recruitment problem. Many of their recruits are either underweight or overweight, and many have very poor eyesight. So they have to lower down their standards in recruitment. Number five, the armed forces put so much premium on their people. Like one soldier, ordinary soldier, the budget for the equipment and everything amounts to around $17,000 US. Whereas in China, the equipment only amounts to $1,500 US. Ever since, like for example, during the Second World War, American fighter planes are heavier because they have to see to it that their pilots are protected, are shielded. Japanese fighters were lighter because there was no protection for the pilot. In other words, the United States always put premium on their people. Maybe the only advantage of China here is their missile capability. But the US also has a lot of counter mechanism. China will never go to an open ocean battle with the United States because they know that the United States has a much superior naval forces. On the other hand, because according to Clausewitz, war is really when you make your opponent impotent. So the final stage of war is really occupation. But I think the United States will find occupying China to be an impossible task given the land area and the population. So the most that they can do, maybe if China is put into a disadvantage, is to negotiate and maybe install a puppet government, of which the Americans are really notorious of. Yeah. So that the combat experience of the soldiers is very, very important.
Okay, so let's listen to General Victor Corpus, who has written extensively on these issues. For example, this whole portfolio here, he has also written a book, the DMAC Points, about the capabilities of China, and his belief is that there is no way the Americans can win. So, General, please present your perspective on this.
I would like to take the opposite view, that in a shooting war between China and the United States, China will win for three major reasons. First is the geographic advantage of China. This means that in a war between U.S. and China, the war necessarily will be in China's backyard, because China's strategy or military doctrine is active defense, that they will never be the first to attack, but if they are attacked, they will surely counterattack. So necessarily it will be the United States that will launch the first attack if there will be war between the two. And it will be in China's backyard. So China will have all the advantages of fighting in its own backyard. First of all, in a war, you have to bring logistics, personnel, equipment, war materials to the battlefield. And in order to do that, the United States has to cross the Pacific Ocean. That will be very vulnerable to submarine interdiction. Secondly, the proximity of the battlefield to China makes China's weapons, especially what they call the assassin's mace. This is the trump card weapon that China developed through the years, that they have now almost perfected or perfected already. These are the anti-ship ballistic missiles that only China has possession of. No other country possesses the anti-ship ballistic missiles. These are medium range and intermediate range ballistic missile that can hit a moving target out to 2,500 miles
Or
for 400
5,000 kilometers? Is
4,000 kilometers
4,000 kilometers.
from the Chinese mainland, that can hit a moving target like the aircraft carrier battle groups. So China, because of this trump card weapon, it can hit not only aircraft carrier battle groups moving at sea, but stationary bases, like air bases harboring stealth aircraft, and also satellites. They can bring down satellite. So in the event of war in China's backyard, the assassin's mace weapons can neutralize all aircraft carrier battle groups, major surface ships, and air bases where the stealth weapons of the United States are being based. And also the satellites, the command and control system of the United States based on satellites. So that's that's one reason.
Number one,
under geographic advantage. Another item under geographic advantage is the artificial bases that China has developed in the South China Sea. Because by developing these bases, China has neutralized any plan to blockade the Malacca Strait that can choke the economy of China. Because with their DF-26 intermediate range ballistic missiles, in those islands, the whole of the Indian Ocean can be covered. And also, the artificial island will also ensure that China cannot be hit with a submarine first strike that will pass through the Scarborough Shoal via the Manila Trench and approach the eastern coast of China, where China can be obliterated within minutes with submarine launched cruise missiles,
Nuclear
nuclear-armed missiles. So China has eliminated that threat of a first strike. If the U.S. wants to strike China with nuclear weapons, they have to use their intercontinental ballistic missiles coming from the U.S. itself. And China can also retaliate in kind. So that's the geographic. That's the first geographic advantage.
Yes.
The second is the China, Russia, Iran triumvirate that occupy and control the Eurasian heartland. The father of geopolitics, Mackinder, stated that who controls the Eurasian heartland will eventually control the world. Or the whole quote runs like this: who controls Eastern Europe will control the Eurasian heartland. Who controls the Eurasian heartland will control the world island, comprising Asia, Europe, and Africa. Who controls the world island will control the world. So China, Russia, and Iran has the advantage of controlling the Eurasian heartland, especially Iran that controls the Hormuz Strait. Okay. So, and then you have the SCO Alliance,
the Shanghai
Cooperation
Organization,
Organization, the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure
Investment
Bank.
That's right.
And then the Belt and Road Initiative that is now consolidating the entire heartland of Eurasia. The third reason is the vulnerable U.S. economy because of the near collapse of the petrodollar. Many countries now, especially China and Russia, are no longer buying oil using the dollar. They are using their own currency. And OPEC now is collapsing. And China and Russia is building their own OPEC. And China has declared that it will buy oil with yuan that is backed by gold. So those moves will eventually cause the collapse of the petrodollar, and with that, the U.S. economy. So that's my...
We'll go to Celso after this question. Number one, Celso was focusing on two things: the experience of the military personnel and the command structure, where they have the joint command, and China may not be at that stage yet. You have any response to that, please?
Can I?
Yeah.
With regards to experience, the modern warfare now is different from the warfare of the past Second World War, or even the Iraq War, the Afghan War. And those wars that the U.S. gained experience were all losses. They lost in Vietnam, they did not win in Iraq, they did not win in Afghanistan. So what kind of experience is that? And that will not be the kind of war that they will meet when they fight with China, because it will be all done by you have a computer in front of you. You can see your enemy on real time. You highlight, you press delete. The computer will ask yes or no. When you put yes, long range, stealthy, highly accurate weapons, missiles, will now go to their target and destroy their target with the push of a button.
Okay.
That is how war is fought nowadays.
Yeah.
And China have been practicing with that kind of warfare for so long. Not the kind of warfare that they fight in Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya.
Yeah. Okay, second question. What
well,
about
they-
your command structure?
Their command structure, they just revise their command structure to make sure that joint command is always present in every decision that they make.
Okay.
You can read that in the internet.
Okay. So I'll ask Celso, well, aside from the past wars that have seen limited success of the American effort, also the issue of being a conflict being fought in the backyard of China would motivate its people with far greater incentive than the force coming from 10,000 miles away. You know? So, Celso, sige,
Maybe before I react, in Vietnam, the Americans won the battle, but they lost the war. No? Anyway, number one, the backyard of China is already riddled or littered with the bases of the American constructed as
400 bases.
early
around,
as the post-Second World War. You know, Okinawa, North Korea, Australia, even in the Philippines, although officially there are no bases here already, but the troops are here, the hardware are here. No? In the Eurasian, of course, if to push the discussion further, if Russia and North Korea will come to the aid of China, Russia has NATO to confront, and the Americans are in Afghanistan, the heart of Eurasia. The Americans are in Turkey; they have a huge base in Turkey. You know, the backyard of China, if it's in a game of chess, the Americans already had several first moves here, since they've been constructing bases here already. Second, I said earlier that China has advantage when it comes to missile capabilities, no? But the U.S. Navy ships are also equipped with Nulka missiles. Nulka missiles were developed by the Australians, actually. They are ghost missiles, you know, because missiles are dependent on radars and satellites. But the moment China fires its aircraft carrier killers, as what General Corpus has mentioned, the Americans will just launch these Nulka missiles. And these aircraft carrier killers, the Chinese missiles, will just hit the waters. They will miss the ships.
Yeah.
Third, I agree with General Corpus that the future war will be more electronic warfare. It's like video games, you know. But the insight of a general who had been to combat, who had been to missile wars or whatever, is very, very important. Maybe for the Chinese general, they have theories, no, but no actual practice. The American generals who had been to actual combat, their failures, their lessons learned, their insights will prove valuable in case of electronic wars.
Okay.
So, bottom line is still the people.
Yeah. I will look at the American reactions to these issues, but let me go first to Vic, General Corpus, and then I'll feature some of the American think tanks' reactions. Go ahead, General. Anything to respond
No,
to?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. So let me first bring you to the RAND Corporation's, one of its latest assessment, War with China, Thinking Through the Unthinkable. Can you flash that on our screen? Well, basically, of course, this is an American think tank. It's a premier think tank, in fact. And it says the damage to both countries is such that it may not be worth it. Although, of course, it concludes that the U.S. will still win the conflict. And as stressed by our two speakers, command and control is one of the keys to winning wars.
Can I comment on
Yeah,
that,
please. Go ahead.
that,
On the first one. From
RAND
Corporation's study. Yeah.
I think there's a defect in the analysis because they assume that China will retaliate if they attack the mainland, because the scenario there is that they will attack the
Command and control centers
command and control centers, the missile bases
of China.
inside the
Yeah.
Chinese mainland.
Yeah.
They're assuming that China will not, when China reacts and counterattack, it will be limited to the battlefield. The battlefield will include the United States mainland. And China has the capability of hitting the mainland United States. And it will do that in coordination with Russia, like what they did when the United States sent 2 aircraft carrier battle groups with the stealth bombers and nuclear submarines during the when the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague was about to release their report.
Yeah.
China and Russia reacted by sending their own nuclear submarines, with China to the west coast of the United States and Russia to the east coast of the United States. If the United States will attack mainland China, China and Russia will also attack mainland United States.
So there are very few people who know
So
that during that period.
That analysis of Rand is wrong, because they are assuming that the strategy of China will be A2 AD
A2 AD, yeah.
or AD A2.
Yeah.
No, that is wrong. That is not the strategy of China. The strategy of China is active defense. We will not attack, but if you attack us, we will counterattack.
So,
when China counterattacks, it will be mainland United States,
So,
not in the South China
in other
Sea.
words, the A2D AD assumes that it will constantly be in a defensive position.
That is a concoction of U.S. strategists. A2AD is not the strategy of China.
Of China, yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just give some word of cautions regarding this think tank and
Rand
their findings.
Corporation, yeah.
You know, the Americans have perfected the art of deception. Many of the think tanks release studies that China will win. It may be part of the deception because they will just embolden China. Because even in Sun Tzu Art of War, Sun Tzu said it's better for your enemy to underestimate you than to overestimate you. Because the moment you hit him, he will not know what hit him. That seems to be the strategy of America right now, to portray to the world that they are weak. Although, on the other hand, they are also portraying that they have the strongest military might in the world. But this think tank, I've noticed, they're trying to portray that America will lose because of this analysis, because of these factors, but it could be deceiving.
Yeah. But on the other hand, the actual experience, which later on I'll show.
No, talking about actual experience, look at World War II. The Battle of Midway was the pivoting point of the Second World War in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway is the perfect example of the art of deception. Admiral Yamamoto then wants to crush the U.S. naval forces. So what the Americans did, they sent radio signal transmission that the main American armada is in Midway. But actually, they were not in Midway. Because the real radio transmissions were done in the Idaho language, Idaho Indian language. If you have watched the movie The Wind Whisperer, they commissioned all these Idaho Indians so that the Japanese could not encrypt. But they were expecting those transmissions to be intercepted by the Americans. So when the Japanese armada attacked Midway, they were surprised. The American armada was not there, and they were clipped and ambushed from the back.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left in our time. Maybe we have to have a second part here. But your reaction first to any reaction, General, to that?
No.
Because I will go on with some of the other material.
Go ahead.
Well, in another, we're supposed to have 5 minutes, but we can extend a little maybe. Again, from Rand Corporation, China beats U.S. in simulated Taiwan air war. Maybe we can flash that. Now, let's do some comparisons.
Can I comment on the
Sure, go ahead.
This one.
This one, yeah. Well, we could go also into the actual developments on the part of China. We're speaking of China 20 years ago, they have practically World War II planes. But now they have J-20 and new stealth fighters and so on. And this is from Business Insider, an American periodical. How China's stealthy new J-20 fighter compares to the US's F-22 and F-35. What's your comment, General?
My comment there is that it is unlikely that the F-22 and the F-35 of the United States will ever engage in a dogfight with the J-20. Because if I'm China, where will the United States base those F-22 and F-35? In bases in maybe Kadena Air Base in Japan, some bases in South Korea, in Australia. If I were China, if a shooting war starts, the first 15 minutes I will destroy all the air bases of those stealth aircraft with my DF-26 and DF-21D. Very accurate. I can destroy them within 15 minutes.
On the
of
other
a
hand,
major car,
the
of
Americans
major
will
war.
try to destroy the Chinese
So,
bases. What will the Americans will also try to destroy the Chinese bases? What is the Chinese response to that? Yeah, because if
They don't have the missiles to do that
they don't have the missiles to do that
right now.
Mhm.
They don't have the missiles in Japan or South Korea. What they have there is the THAAD.
Yeah, the third. Yeah.
Okay.
And what about the Chinese? I understand the Chinese have also subterranean airfields for their planes, meaning underground air bases.
Yeah, they have 41 underground air bases. Compared to the U.S. and its allies, they have only 2. One in Taiwan and one in South Korea. So in a shooting war between the United States and China, if I were China, within the first 15 minutes, I will destroy all the important air and naval bases of the United States and its allies. They now have 400, as reported in the in the internet. I can destroy them within 15 minutes.
Okay,
with a barrage of very
missiles.
accurate missiles.
Two things. Well, regarding with these Chingdo J-20 stealth fighters, again, the pilots have no combat experience. They will have their first day jitters. Second, China may have difficulty destroying all those bases because the Americans have perfected the art of countermeasures.
Okay, well,
But right now, they don't have.
They have.
No, they don't have a countermeasure for the DF-21D.
yeah, that's why there are many articles
Hindi pa nila
also
kaya.
in the
They
West.
They cannot intercept a warhead that
But,
maneuvers.
yeah, and okay.
Maneuvering warhead.
And then China is building a third aircraft carrier to protect overseas interests. And there's a lot of discussion on the drone swarms, missile swarms, cruise missile swarms of China. Not only aerial drone swarms, but Beijing is using underwater drones in South China Sea to show off its might, meaning hundreds, if not thousands, of underwater drones against aircraft carriers. You know?
Anti-submarine.
And just to finish off what I had prepared from Peter Mansour, writing for the Hoover Institution, why America can't win its wars. So this goes into a review of Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on, Vietnam, of course, and why the U.S. has not been able to win any of these. And finally, there is this article by Arthur Waldron, there is no Thucydides trap, meaning this thesis from the Western war theoretician saying that the Thucydides trap is unavoidable, meaning the rising power and the existing power will inevitably come into conflict. I think that China is trying to negate this by moving forward with its military technology, strategies, and so on. So we have our last minute. We'll just have to, of course, I have this quote from General Patton, men win wars and not weapons. And finally, Sun Tzu, subduing the enemy without fighting. Because I think that is what Xi Jinping has been saying. They will modernize the Chinese military and therefore convince and persuade the rivals that there is no point anymore in trying to defeat China. So final words from Celso and then from General Corpus.
Okay, I have 4 points. First, regarding the DF-20, their maneuverability depends on radio signals, and Americans have perfected the art of jamming. Number two, I remembered Colin Powell, when he was the head of the Joint Chief, was asked, what is the secret of the U.S. Armed Forces? He said three things: training, training, and training. So I think China, aside from beefing up its hardware, should go through a lot of training. And those news that you reported earlier about the naval exercises are good. Number three, I think, I agree, China does not have to go to war to win a victory. In 2007, when the Shanghai Stock Exchange collapsed, it brought the whole world down with it. So it only shows the economic might of China. Fourth, I'm very, very glad that President Trump is the President of the United States right now. Had Hillary Clinton won, we would have been at war right now. Trump is a very, very practical person, a pragmatic businessman. He will, at the end of the day, he knows how to cut a deal.
Okay, so General.
Maybe my last word will be on the first question, war or not.
Yeah.
I think war will depend on the United States. If the group known as the Project for the New American Century,
Or the
the
neoconservatives.
so-called neoconservatives, will dominate the circles of leadership in Washington, then there will be a war. Because it's their doctrine that they will never allow a peer competitor to arise. They will conduct a preemptive war before that potential rival will overtake them. So,
Okay. And my final point is, I think President Xi Jinping and the new era under socialism with Chinese characteristics is not only talking about military modernization, but economic, financial swamping of the West with the petro-yuan now, which will weaken the petrodollar. But obviously, we have not had enough time. Maybe we need a second part to this discussion. Maraming salamat po. And let's keep the debate going. Have a good weekend.